Hello again. I wanted to talk about a subject that I've been interested to note that a lot of people have been presenting information in a way that, I get it, it's compelling, there's a story behind something, and something is confirming what you've always suspected. And this is what we refer to as belief or confirmation bias. And my whole thing is to try to get a better conversation going about, what's fact and what's not fact. So I've been involved in complementary therapy for 30 years, and so a lot of the things that we talk about are things that we feel deeply to be true, but we don't necessarily know it because it hasn't been clarified or identified independently. So we have to always be quite careful about the claims that we make, and that's why we have things like the Advertising Standards Authority. But when it comes down to other things, there are certain bits of information that will get put to us that will be quite emotive, and there's lots of sources out there for information. And what I wanted to do was to ask you to think about how you take on board certain information, how you go about processing certain types of information, where it comes from. I've been studying at university for the last few years, and so I have to be very careful about the type of information I present and the type of claims I make without referencing or citations. So there is a criteria which is offered to us as students, which is called the prompt criteria. And this is a way of critically assessing material in order to be able to understand what it is that you're watching and looking at, listening to, and where it's come from. It'll allow you to determine the kind of content that you're reading. If you're convinced of your position, you want to, present your argument, opinion in the best light, then you want to make sure that the information that you are referring to is valid, right? I mean, that's what we all want to do. We want to have a backup. So this is a very and completely neutral way of presenting anything. And it can be anything from a knitting pattern to, the discussion around something more controversial. And it behoves you as somebody arguing on behalf of something to make sure that the information that you're presenting is accurate, and this is just a way of doing it. And the way that it's done is called the prompt criteria, and prompt is a mnemonic for so few letters, 6 letters. And each letter stands for something, and this is the prompt criteria. So I'm just going to run through them quickly. We might do this in 2 sessions, we'll see. But this is our prompt criteria. So P stands for presentation, and then there's relevance, objectivity, method, provenance, and timeliness. And I'll just go through these very, very briefly because it's quite an in-depth subject. But presentation asks you, how was the information presented? What kind of imagery or logos came with it? What kind of language does it use? How is it presented to you? How well is the content written? Does it have spelling mistakes, or does it use language or phrasing which doesn't sound right? There's a lot of stuff being generated by AI now, and you can kind of tell if something's not quite right. So, how is it presented? And then we have the relevance of something. Now, this could be quite a few areas. We could be saying something that's geographical relevance. So if somebody's talking about free speech or the Second Amendment or anything like that, then that might not apply to us as far as our geographical relevance is concerned, but it might be relevance in relation to the subject that we're talking about. Does it veer off? And the level in relation to that, is it simple or is it very detailed? If the detail is there, does it come with explanatory notes? Lots of people offer information, but when you ask them bits of what it means, they're not necessarily clear about what they're looking at it. So is there an emphasis on something? Is this information putting an emphasis on one area of interest, or is it more broad? Does it go off in different directions and trying to make a point? The next one we have is objectivity. Really, really important. In an ideal world, everything would be objective or balanced. You'd present all the arguments and all the evidence from both sides and leave this up to your reader to weigh up the considerations. But in the real world, that's not how it goes. And we do recognize that information is going to be presented from a position of interest. That's how it goes, whether it's a newspaper article or an article on a website. And that's not necessarily intentional, but it's something that you have to look out for. So the onus is on you as the reader to develop a critical eye and awareness of those positions that are being represented in what you read, and then you have to take account of that when you interpret that information. And you have to recognize also that your own belief systems and your own opinions are going to influence your ability to be dispassionate. So your own bias is something that you have to recognize. Do you want this information to be true? And if so, how prepared are you for it not to be true? And there is a sort of a cognitive dissonance that we've invested so much in our belief system that it's hard for us to hear any other information. And whenever I ask the question of somebody, what would it take for you to change your mind? If the answer is nothing, we can't have a conversation. So look out for objectivity. Sometimes authors are explicitly expressing a particular viewpoint. If you read, somebody that's a fan of Arsenal that's writing about Arsenal, he's going to be writing from the perspective of an Arsenal fan, and you can hardly expect him to be really objective when it comes to discussing Man United or the failures of his particular team. But sometimes those biases aren't as obvious as that. So whether it's deliberate or not can be misleading. Look at the perspectives that somebody's coming from. What's the viewpoint? Does somebody have a clearly defined position that they're coming from? Opinions. If you've got academic articles, they will sometimes present unsubstantiated theories, for debate. We're looking for debate. So is that what's going on here? And the language being used. Look out for language that is emotive, that makes you feel something. If you're feeling something, and then it's because the language is written, and this is what novels are for, this is what fiction is for, this is what plays and scripts are for. We can read things that make us feel something, and that's deliberately designed to do that. Look out also for sponsorship. Now that could be political, it could be commercial, it could be personal. Academic research can be sponsored by industry or government, and it doesn't make it less objective, but it means that you have to interpret it selectively, and so that you understand where it's coming from. So make sure that all your potential vested interests within the thing that you're looking at are clearly identified. And at the bottom of research papers, people will have to say, is there any conflict of interest, or is there any sponsorship going on, or is there any vested interest in going on in here? The next thing is methods, and this is a tricky one to establish, but if you're reading a scientific paper, how does somebody come to the conclusion that they're reaching? And this could be a website article or a newspaper article. If somebody is coming to a conclusion, how have they got there? What's the information, the data that they've used to get there? Have they gone through the same criteria as this? In research, methods are what gives something reliability. If somebody did something, if I picked up my cup of tea and had a sip, and then something else happened, I need to explain exactly what I did, so that anybody then comes along to decide whether what I've come up with is reliable. They can do exactly the same thing. So coming up with the result is fine, but doing it once doesn't tend to cut it. So you have to do it over and over again. So you have to show people how you did it. So if somebody else did that and they got a different result, then that would call into question what my original methods were. So how did they get to that? Now, that's all very well in science, but if somebody's making a statement about something on a website or an article that you're reading, or even a tweet, or is it an X these days, whatever it is, then how did they get there? Are they stating a fact without backing that up with any other information? The next one here is provenance. Where did this come from? Where did this thing originate from? And who produced it? So that's going to provide a clue as to, sometimes it's reliability as well. Provenance represents the credentials of a piece of information, and so that supports its status. It's really, really important that you are able to identify the person that is writing the thing that you are reading. Not a pseudonym, not a funny name, whatever Bart Simpson names were, Seymour Butts, but identifying who this person is. And so we might see something on a news channel or YouTube from someone who seems honest and reliable, and it's a place that we've always relied on, but we need to know, who is coming up with that. Science and scientific papers rarely, if ever, provide concrete evidence. That's not what they're doing. They're pointing at trends. They're making suggestions. They're saying that this is what this study suggested, and it seems from the literature that. So there's always this leading idea of this is what we found, but more generally speaking, most papers are saying more research is needed in the field. If anything is appearing really cut and dry and it's convinced you of something, be very wary of that. Be suspicious. The weight of the data provides, it's dull, I know, but provides reliability, and so things need to get repeated. So in the article you're reading, is somebody contactable? Do they have an X account or a YouTube account? Are you able to leave comments? Are you able to ask them questions about what it is that they've done? In the same as the paper is concerned, there'll generally be a point of contact for the paper. Are the people who are writing this experts in their field, and are they acknowledged by others as experts in the field? They may know more than you or me, but that doesn't necessarily mean to say that they're experts in the field. And so we need to be careful about relying on people who have come into something that aren't necessarily experts and that don't necessarily have a clear view from within the field of expertise. If Brian Cox was talking about astrophysics, then fine. But if he turns up and starts telling me how to make hummus and how to make sourdough, then I might go, well, what's his field of expertise here? How is he contributing to the discussion? Within Provenance, we're looking at, are the views controversial? Is somebody trying to create controversy? Are they trying to take a contrary point? Who else cites them and supports their views? It's really interesting. Who else is supporting these people? And there's that old phrase that if a third person sits down with two people of a certain political bent, say, then there are three people of the same bent at the table. So we have to be looking about who is this person and where do they fit in to the general picture. There's a lot of information on the internet. Anybody can publish anything on the internet, but you may be surprised that not everything that you read on Facebook is necessarily true or even representative of the facts. So you've got to look at a lot of papers around one subject to get to the crux of the matter. And then finally is timeliness. How relevant is the information to now? This is going to vary. An article that was discussing the in-depth of what Queen Cleopatra wore for jewellery that was written in 1960, may well be fine because not much has changed about those facts. We understand that. But an article written about mobile phone technology that was written even relatively recently could easily be obsolete or out of date. So when is it clear when the information was published? And something needs to be dated in order for you to be able to establish how timely it is. And if anything doesn't have a date on it, it's going to be hard to track down, and so it's just been put out there. And so this is what I ask when people present me with supporting evidence for a discussion or a conversation or a debate or an argument we're having. And it's really surprising that the stuff that I get given that acts as evidence, and threads on X don't, to me, count as reliable evidence. They may be somebody's opinion or a view, and people will say to me, well, I'm entitled to an opinion. Well, yes, you are, but an opinion is I think that restaurant is very bad, and that, or I think that the Mrs. Thatcher or whatever, I'm not even going to go there. I think that this is my opinion about something, but that doesn't mean that your opinion is a fact, and facts aren't opinions. Opinions are feelings or ideas about something, but if I have an opinion that 2 and 2 equals 7, well, I can have that opinion, but it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it a fact. And yes, you are entitled to your opinion, but you have to understand that we've all got opinions. But what we have to look at is what the facts are and how we get to those facts. And there is somebody said to me recently, there's people that are living in two realities, in different realities. No, they're not. We're all living in the same reality. It's just that some people are looking at different information as to how and how they then get that information, and so therefore they're not being given the full facts and they're believing information that is not accurate. So this method, if you just go through it, allows you to be critical if you want to be. If you have made up your mind that that is your view and you're going to stick to it, then great, and that's belief, that's religion, that's whatever you want to go there. But that's not science. That's not changing things. It doesn't alter things. And you're certainly not going to persuade me to come on board with that, because it doesn't work. It's just a daft position to come from. So critical analysis. We'll do another time on critical reading, because again, there's a way of establishing how to read something critically and to make sure that you're getting all that information. So a bit of a sort of convoluted subject and a bit tricky, but I wanted to put it out there because I get a lot of this kind of, I'm not going to go down the idea of misinformation, but I get a lot of people presenting me with stuff that is just it doesn't hold water in terms of reasonable opinions. So it'd be really good for people to go through this process before they get to presenting me with the information they end up sending me. Hope you found that useful. Pop your comments down below, and let's have a discussion about it, because this is how we progress. We progress by sharing our understanding and our views. And like, subscribe, do all the things we're supposed to do on social media, and I'll see you next time.